or it's just a new development paving the way for this memorandum of understanding to be signed, is something that we have to keep waiting. In addition, we've got this cloud of mistrust among Iranians talking about the trajectory of diplomacy. They're saying that while they were already engaged in negotiations, they were attacked, and also they're thinking about such a possibility ahead. Also, we know that speaking of the upcoming deal, whether it's going to be reached or not, we're talking about a memorandum of understanding, not a long-lasting solution, seeing the very fact that we are dealing with a relatively long list of sticking points of contention between the United States and Iran, the situation at the Strait of Hormuz versus the naval blockade, the frozen assets, the sanctions, as well as war reparations, and actually the security assurances that Iran is looking for, while there are other controversial issues such as the ballistic missiles, regional relations of the country, and these are all creating a sort of very complicated situation which requires a certain amount of time to be resolved. Right now, if reached, that memorandum of understanding, according to some media reports and speculation, is going to provide a relatively, let's say, sufficient amount of time, maybe 60 days, for the two sides to sit down and further discuss all these matters of difference. But whether at the end of the day it's going to be translated into long-lasting peace is something that we have to keep waiting.
Tahid, stay there. We're going to come back to you in just a moment, but let's go back to our White House correspondent, Kimberly Halkett. Now, there has been a lot of pressure on Donald Trump, but how much pressure do you think he was under to get to an actual agreement?
Donald Trump's under an enormous amount of pressure. Excuse me. And it has to do with the fact that his pressure point is the price of oil, which is rapidly going back and forth with each successive announcement made by Donald Trump. So that is the major concern for this White House, given the fact that with each rise in the price of oil, that translates into higher gasoline prices. Donald Trump promised to bring the cost of goods and services down in the United States, and yet we've just had inflation numbers that show those prices are continuing to rise. So Donald Trump has to satisfy American voters. But the other big issue is the financial markets, not just domestically, but also globally. And again, this instability is something that Donald Trump has at the back of his mind. But politically, there is also another big price to pay, and that is satisfying the war hawks here in Washington that are demanding Iran never have a nuclear weapon. You remember that Donald Trump withdrew from the 2015 JCPOA, or our agreement to limit Iran's nuclear program that was negotiated under Barack Obama. He constantly said that this was a bad deal, that he could get a better deal, but that's proving difficult. And so Donald Trump is under a lot of pressure as well to not only satisfy those war hawks, but ensure that this is a better deal. And so far, given the fact that he's not managed to limit Iran's nuclear program or reopen the Strait of Hormuz, most people say that this appears to be worse, and that's a problem for Donald Trump, given the November midterm elections are looming.
That's Kimberly Halkett live for us there from the White House. Thank you so much. Now, let's go back to Tahid Asadi, who's in Tehran. All of this talk of a potential framework for a peace deal. How's that playing out in the streets of Tehran for Iranians generally?
All Iranians are hearing that the deal is right around the corner for several times, so there is this doubt shared among the public, and that is going to obviously highlight the mixture of different sentiments that we hear and we see among the public, which is frustration, and they are worried that whether at the end of the day it's going to be a deal or another round of confrontation. And for them, confrontation has got a certain meaning, because in the previous two wars, they witnessed that not only the military sites and political centers, but also when it comes to civilian infrastructure, the damage was quite massive and enormous, and that is creating this sense of fear and uncertainty regarding this dichotomy of war or peace. And also, this uncertainty is putting a certain amount of impact on the economic situation in the country, and it goes without saying that, speaking of this economic situation, we are dealing with a deteriorating accelerated situation which puts a certain amount of pressure on the livelihoods of the people. The Iranian economy is dealing with high prices, increasing inflation, and devaluation of the local currency. And with negotiations underway and with the potentiality of a deal to be reached, there is this hope, however slim in the slide, that at the end of the day, a deal could end up in the removal of sanctions, and hopefully that's going to put another impact on people's lives, their livelihoods with respect to this situation. Also, we know that among a certain proportion of the Iranian society, there is this rally around the flag impact, and they are trying to gather at night on nightly basis, starting from the very day one of the war, to show this message of solidarity and support to the political establishment. The message of resilience is quite clear there. However, this is a very intricate situation, not only for those who are negotiating, but also for very ordinary citizens who are living under all these challenges inside the country.
That's Tawhid Asadi there, live for us from Tehran. Thank you. Now let's find out the reaction in Israel. Noor Odeh is live for us in Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. What are the reactions in Israel to this potential agreement between Washington and Tehran? And is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on board?
Well, he hasn't said if he's on board, Imran, because this deal or whatever we're seeing in the media leaks about it is not exactly what Netanyahu was looking for, because Israel was not looking for a deal. It was looking to topple the Islamic Republic of Iran. And according to many sources in Israel, the Israeli government was blindsided. Now, the fact that there are news, officials are implying that the deal would include a cessation of hostilities in Lebanon, this will create a domestic crisis for Benjamin Netanyahu, but he's not ready to come to heads with the U.S. president about this. He's instead talked about the shared objective of denying Iran the possibility of having a nuclear weapon, that this is a goal that he's worked for decades and that he shares with Donald Trump. No comment really on compliance, but we did hear from the Minister of Energy from Netanyahu's Likud party saying that Israel doesn't have to abide by a deal that it wasn't part of.
That's Noor Odeh live for us there in Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Thank you. Now, Wolfgang Pustai is a security policy and defense analyst and a former defense attaché to Austria, for Austria. Now, he joins us from Vienna. Operation Epic Fury, launched on February 28th by Israel and the US, was supposed to bring about a radical change within the Iranian government and the wider region as well. So how do you think history will remember this operation, as a success or a failure?
I would say at the beginning, the objectives of this operation were not really clear. Some people in the United States and the Prime Minister of Israel stated that it is a regime change. This objective was certainly not realistic. This objective was certainly not prepared in a realistic way. So this was certainly a failure. On the other side, with regard to the other objectives, to deny Iran a nuclear weapon, history will tell us if this will work, yes or no. But the third main component is, and this was certainly not calculated, neither in Washington nor in Tel Aviv, what about the Strait of Hormuz? If this war, if this confrontation ends with Iran dominating the Strait of Hormuz, if this ends with Iran allowing ships passing the Strait of Hormuz, yes or no, then this was certainly a failure. So we will see, I guess, in the next weeks or months if the overall operation was a success or a failure.
Now, Wolfgang, what does this mean for the region? Has this radically changed the thinking of America's Gulf allies, for example, Qatar, the UAE, etc., when it comes to their own security? Because there was a reliance on the US to provide security.
Yes, this certainly changes a lot for the Arab Gulf states. Obviously, the United States was not able to protect the Gulf states from any Iranian strikes. But let me stress, this was certainly also not realistic. It is a different story if you want to protect Israel, which is a small country, or if you want to protect the whole Arab Peninsula. But what was also probably in the meantime made clear to the Arab Gulf states, if the United